Are you a runner who keep getting injured, or are you one of the few runners who never had an injury? I have had my share of injuries, but that was mostly in the past. After many years as a runner, I know what to do and what to not to do to stay injury-free. When I last year ran a half marathon in 1 hour and 30 minutes as a 46-year-old, it was after a long period without any injury. And I believe that the key to running success is to stay injury-free in the best possible way. In this video, I will give you my best personal tips to how I have been able to stay injury-free for a long time. All the tips are based on my own experience, and every injury, big or small, has taught me something new. It's not all about what you should do, it's also about what you shouldn't do. Sometimes I have learned it the hard way. So let's start with my tip number 1. Something surprisingly that I have learned is that running slow isn't only a good thing. When it was off season, I took the winter months to build aerobic fitness and ran a lot of miles, but the runs were always in the same easy and steady pace for several weeks and maybe months. My focus was only to build endurance, but this monotonous and repetitive running day in and day out can be too monotonous and repetitive, and you would get injured, and it happened to me. Although I still use the winter months to build endurance and strength, I nowadays also run intervals and some threshold training. In this way I run with a different running style than when I run slowly, and I use my muscle and joints in different ways. So the variation is greater. And another advantage is that when spring comes and I have to start my more serious speed sessions, I don't have to start from scratch, and that is also positive for staying injury-free. As soon as you do something that you're not used to, do it with reason. For example, if you're not used to running on trails or uphills, keep those runs short the first few times you try them out. See how your legs and feet react the following days. The same applies to mobility, stretching, strength training. It's easy to be inspired by others and start something new. Maybe it feels easy once you practice it, but then the next day you might instead have heard from the new things you did. So do everything with caution the first few times and see how your ligaments and muscles react. It's easy to do as others do, but it's not certain it suits you. And this has happened to me both in terms of stretching and strength training. I, who basically never stretch, thought I would do it anyway since it seems by others to be a good thing. And I did it too well and I got a tear in my hamstring. As I said in my previous tips, I rarely practice static stretching, as when you move a muscle as far as it can go without feeling any pain and then hold that position for maybe 20 to 25, 40 seconds or something. But I do spend some time with my massage pillow and my massage gun, and they really do their thing when I have stiff legs or if I have a minor problem that could turn into a big problem if I don't address it. For example, I often get stiff in my glutes, and this in turn leads to pain in my back and thighs, but to use my gun on my butt for just a couple of minutes really helps. And I also use them even when I don't feel stiff or have an ache, because I think it's very positive for recovery to have increased blood circulation in my muscles. If you don't have access to these tools, you can use just a small trigger ball that you roll on your muscles. And don't forget that you can be stiff in a place that can affect other parts of your body. Don't think that if you have an ache in a knee that the problem also must originate from the knee. Pain in your knee can actually, for example, originate from your neck or your back. And if you are new to my channel, I hope you like this video so far. On my channel you can follow my running adventures as well as my tips on how you can develop as a runner. This channel is all about running, but I like to run short, I like to run long, fast and slow, so you will get a little bit of everything. And for those of you who have been with me for a while, you make me so happy with your kind and encouraging comments. I don't have this channel for any kind of show off. I started the channel because I wanted to share my experience as a runner and give other runners the belief in themselves that they can develop as a runner for a long time. So once again, thank you all. Don't get back to hard running too fast after running a tough race. If you run a tough race and feel tired the next few days, it can be quite easy to tell yourself that you need to take it easy on running for a while. But sometimes you run a race and it's gone beyond your expectation and you feel light and recovered already a couple of days after. But it is easy to be deceived by this. The fatigue and wear and tear can come 1 to 2 weeks after that race and then hit you with more force than it would have if you had taken it easy in the days after the race. I did run 2 marathons in 2 weeks last year and it all went well, but between those 2 I almost didn't run at all. But I have also in the past started running hard soon after a race, and my recovery takes double the time than it should. Or maybe you run a race that didn't go at all as you had planned and feel like you want revenge and will go back to training too quickly. And remember then to take it easy. This I know is very common amongst runners, and that is when we feel that everything goes our way. We feel strong and we feel fast and we just want to run more and more and faster without any reflection. I see this on social media all the time. Runners who are so proud to be able to run so fast and so hard in almost every session, day after day, with no easy session in between. And of course they get a lot of likes from it as well. And many times after a month or 2 they put up a feed that they have an injury. And it doesn't always have to end as badly as an injury, but the body can become so tired and worn out and you can catch a long-term cold, for example. I remember one time when I went to the physician, I had an injury in my calf and he asked me how much I had run the last weeks and if I had increased my running a lot lately. And I answered no, because I didn't think I had. But then he wanted to know how many Ks I had been running each week. So I pulled out my Strava and I said the numbers, which were around 50K and then 60K and then 70, 75K or something. And I remember I didn't reflect over those numbers at all. I didn't thought the increase was that much. But then he gave me his angry face and said that I had increased my dose by 20-25% per week. I didn't think the increase sounded like much per week at first, but when he said it that way, I realized that I had increased too quickly. So this was my first 5 tips, and before I go on with my next 5 tips, I just want to tell you that I have many exciting things going on later this year, like London Marathon in October, and I will also run one of the UTMB qualifier race later this year. And I will of course, as always, share this with you guys, so if you are interested in that, you should subscribe to my channel. Okay, so let's move on to my 6th tip and advice. And that is, thanks to apps like Strava, I do make a little extra effort. I think it's a positive thing. I always like to reach my goals and I feel satisfied if I succeed in taking a segment, for example. And it means that I might run a little more and a little faster than if I didn't have Strava. And as long as you can keep a distance from it all, it's fine. But the problem can be when you don't want to run easy or short just because you start wondering about what your followers will think. Maybe you also know that you will get more kudos if you do a tough session than an easy one. But don't apologize for yourself. I always start my runs very slow if you compare with my speed after a couple of Ks. It's part of my warm-up and my body needs it not to get injured. And in the past, I can admit that I sometimes went out too hard when I started some of my runs, since I wanted my overall pace to more reflect the pace I had in the latter part of my runs. But today I don't care about that at all. My first 2 to 3 kilometers of each run are always much slower than the remaining kilometers. But these days I'm completely unbridled about it because I know I need that warm-up. And that's a great tip by itself, that you should ease into your run so to have time to get warm and adjusted. This tip is actually the one that I myself have the hardest time to stick to. Over and over I have become fixated on my own distance goal. But I'm getting better and better, and I'm trying to convince myself it's just a number. I usually have a minimum limit of miles I want to reach each month and a yearly goal. And this is a lot to do with me running long races, and I need a pretty high volume. I'm a person who needs having goals like that to be motivated even on those days when it's cold, rainy, even snowy, for example, when it's hard to get out. And if you are like me, who need those goals and you become stronger by them, it's equally important to be able to take a step back if you feel that you're getting too fatigued. Say you want to be able to run at least 100K a month, but at the end of the month you've hit the 95K and you feel like you have something that aches a little, then tell yourself that 95 is just a number and you have done well. Those 5 extra kilometers may well prove to be the last straw that breaks the camel's back. and you will need to take a longer time off from running instead if you had listened to your body in the first time. And this advice is especially for those of you who run more than twice a week, and that is to have at least 2 pair of shoes for your typical easy distance run. I usually have a favorite running shoe that I wear on most of my easy runs, but regardless of whether they are my favorites, I run approximately every 3rd or 4th run in a different pair of shoe. And this is to some extent breaking the monotonous movement that running is. Changing shoes can make your running pattern a little different from time to time, and it's much needed. The shoe might have different stack heights and different support. This need of change in your running pattern brings me on to tip number 9. And that is that you should run on different surfaces. If you're a habitual asphalt runner, run from time to time on pads or other uneven grounds. And the same applies to you who run a lot on trails, to sometimes go out on the roads and let your feet test on a slightly harder but faster surface. If you change the usual terrain that you usually run in, you get some variety in your running and your body and legs are challenged in new ways. And maybe you have heard that if you're going to race on asphalt, you should train on asphalt. And that was anyway something I heard when I was training for my first marathon 15 years ago. But in recent years I mostly run on gravel roads because I find it gentler, but at the same time my feet have to work harder due to the uneven surface, and it has not made me a worse marathoner, quite the opposite. Have you ever had an injury? And if you have, what have been your biggest lesson learned? Please comment below. Let's talk about strength training. Sometimes it can be hard to find time for that, but then you should know that if you have trouble finding time for strength training or just simply don't like it, you should know that running itself is a good way to strengthen your feet and legs. When you run downhill, for example, you put a lot of effort on your front thighs, and when you run uphill you will work with your calves and your hamstrings. And if you have the opportunity to run in unmarked terrain, that is also very good strength training. And if you're really in the mood, you can run past to a park bench and stop and do some different strength exercises, such as a push-up or leg curls. I often get questions about how I train, how many hours per week and how fast I run my intervals, for example. And I do think that can be very interesting. I have that interest myself when seeing other runners accomplish good results, etc., like I did in this video here. But the key to develop as a runner and thus be able to run longer and also maybe faster, or for most runners and for me for sure, is to stay injury free. I have all my PBs from this last year, and that is because all of the experience I have gained over the years. And there's a fine line between staying injury free and running as much and as fast as possible. But if you follow some of my tips, you don't need to learn everything the hard way as I did. And have a nice run, and I see you soon. Bye!